They may be crippled by public debt, out of work in their millions and still saddled with the Afghanistan war, but President Barack Obama told Americans today that their country is back. Barely 9 months before he faces the ballot box, the President delivered an upbeat State of the Union speech that renewed many of the pledges he's certain to use on the election campaign trail. At the heart of it was a cry for economic fairness. Tim Palmer reports.
Here was a president hoping for re-election in an America where 13 million of his countrymen are out of work. But the tone of optimism gave no sense of that. America, according to the president, is back.
Anyone who tells you otherwise, anyone who tells you that America is in decline or that our influence has waned, doesn't know what they're talking about. The defining issue of
the president laid out what he sees as roadblocks to completing that recovery, all revolving around what he calls the defining issue of our time, economic fairness.
We can either settle for a country where a shrinking number of people do really well, while a growing number of Americans barely get by. Or we can restore an economy where everyone gets a fair shot and everyone does their fair share and everyone plays by the same set of rules.
He wants to paint the Republicans as the party of the rich and the Democrats as the party of the middle class. And the key voting groups that he wants to win over are those independents, the moderate voters from the battleground states in Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Indiana. These are the folks who voted for him en masse in 2008, but all the opinion polls show that they have soured on him, and he wants to win them over on this issue of tax and fairness and the middle class values.
Not surprisingly, Barack Obama's strategy to make America fairer centres on the tax reforms he's already announced, in particular reversing some massive tax breaks to the wealthy.
Right now, because of loopholes and shelters in the tax code, a quarter of all millionaires pay lower tax rates than millions of middle-class households. Right now, Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. Do we want to keep these tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans? Now, you can call this class warfare all you want, but asking a billionaire to pay at least as much as his secretary in taxes? Most Americans would call that common sense.
Common sense politics too, when the focus on unfair tax breaks to the wealthy will invariably again fall on the Republican presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, whose tax records were made public just before the speech. They show he paid just under 14% on his earnings of $22 million last year.
I think he'd like to take on Mitt Romney because Mitt Romney will be one of the richest men ever to run for office. He's just released his tax returns. They showed he earned something like, $40 million in 2 years, and he only paid $6 million. Now, of course, it is complicated because that tax was not on income and salaries and wages, it was on more his investments. But that's an opportunity for the Democrats to paint the spokesperson for the Republican Party as Mr. Monopoly Man without the cane and hat.
President Obama's speech, like all scripted American political moments, had a carefully chosen support cast ready for the cameras. His message of recovery coincided with that of Gabrielle Gifford's own fight back to Congress from last year's Arizona shooting. Billionaire Warren Buffett's secretary, Debbie Bosnick, was there as a reminder of the tax inequality her bosses railed against. And Steve Jobs' widow, Laureen Powell Jobs, sat near Michelle Obama, an emblem to voters of American enterprise and ingenuity. Against that, House Republicans watched on with faces that could have been carved from Mount Rushmore stone as the president turned his attention to energy policy.
And tonight I'm directing my administration to open more than 75% of our potential offshore oil and gas resources.
While he pushed for clean energy development, for an Australian government looking for any sign that Washington might have had carbon pricing on the agenda, There was only disappointment.
The differences in this chamber may be too deep right now to pass a comprehensive plan to fight climate change.
We're very progressive on a wide range of environmental and energy issues, but there was one thing missing, and that was a price on carbon. And this is in stark contrast to his first major address to both houses of Congress when he championed a cap-and-trade scheme, or what we call an ETS.
Regulations are outdated.
In the current domestic economic malaise, foreign policy was reduced to a footnote. The President acknowledged the wave of change across the Middle East.
A year ago, Gaddafi was one of the world's longest-serving dictators, a murderer with American blood on his hands. Today, he is gone. And in Syria, I have no doubt that the Assad regime will soon discover that the forces of change cannot be reversed.
No warning there, though, that change in Syria would come about through any involvement from Washington. On Iran, though, the President's tone was very different.
Let there be no doubt. America is determined to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and I will take no options off the table to achieve that goal.
The motif of American military might and competence, especially in the killing of Osama bin Laden, marked the speech's opening and likewise its closing comments, as the President, battling to restore American pride, evoked a nation with values like the team of SEALs commandos that killed the al-Qaeda leader.
This nation is great because we get each other's backs. And if we hold fast to that truth in this moment of trial, there is no challenge too great, no mission too hard. As long as we are joined in common purpose, as long as we maintain our common resolve, our journey moves forward and our future is hopeful. And the state of our union will always be strong. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
Tim Palmer with that report.